Here is the story of our family's vacation Bigfoot encounter in 1992. As God is my judge, this story is 100% true and as accurate as my recollection of those events. Some of my memory may be, possibly, inexact, but I'm sure I'm close, and after reading this account, my sweet wife Laura said what you may have forgotten, dear, you made up for in enthusiasm. At the time, we were living in the upper Midwest, in the nicest, politest, cleanest state in the Union. A lot of that has changed, but c'est la vie. My wife's father had been working as a construction engineer on a development in one of Florida's boom towns. I guess when you think about it, all of Florida's towns are boom towns. Anyway, Bill was there long term with my mother-in-law, Lee, and they invited us down because they were close to Disney World, Sea World, Gator World, and Cracker World, and knew our two kids, Elizabeth and Ray Jr., would love to see all that. In fact, we had never been to the South, so this would be interesting for us all. Come spring break, we headed out. We couldn't afford to fly, so we would be driving, but I love to drive, and Laura was doing fairly well with the car sickness in those days, so we took off in the big Chevy. That was a man's car, the Impala, built for the highways and interstates. Not a cheap little go-kart that passes for an automobile like these days. We had driven through a couple states when my son, Ray Jr., said, "Hey, Dad, we just passed a sign that read Mason-Dixon line. What's that mean?" "Break out your banjo, boy," I said back. "It means we're in Dixie." Then I hummed a few lines from the iconic film Deliverance. We didn't really suppose the South was like that anymore. We weren't prepared for the new South of muscle cars and double wides. To tell you the truth, which I will always do, the South was all right. I tend to remember its states by associating them with foods. Super salty ham in Virginia. Praline gut bombs for Georgia. Coconut toast spread in Florida. Actually, we had some really good barbecue in Tennessee. I think it was the night we spent at Shoutout Mountain. One thing we noticed right away about the South was the way the waitresses would always call us hun or sugar, or sometimes honey sugar. This got on my wife's nerves, and she would snarl, "If she calls you sugar one more time, I'm going to sugar her." "Hun," I said, "you know they just do that for the tips. It's no big deal." "Well, I've got a tip for her," Laura replied. "You ain't woman enough to sugar my man." Actually, truthfully, which I will always be with you, I didn't find the Southern waitresses to be so much different than the waitresses back home in Minnesota, except maybe they did it with bigger hair and a lot more makeup. Anyway, let's skip over the Florida stuff, because the Bigfoot encounter took place on our trip back. This was near Cannonburg, Tennessee, on the Rebels Retreat Highway. We had stopped at McClure's Motor Court that night. Moon Pie McClure was our host. He was a gentle giant of a man, and by now we had spent enough time in Dixie to be patient about how slow he talked and all, and we no longer would finish his sentences. "Did you all want to use the pool?" Mooney drawled. "I can have Lester toss on some more chlorine, ain't no bother." The kids, of course, were delighted by this. We spent the time resting by the pool, the kids naturally splashing and making a big racket, which may account for what happened later that night. We drove into town and had sugar honey ham sandwiches at Stonewall Jackson's Last Stand restaurant. It had been a tiring day, and we turned in at dark. Thankfully, in Tennessee, there weren't any lizards skittering across the ceiling like there had been in Florida. I could hear Beth, my daughter, rustling around. Then she got up and was peeking through the curtains out toward the pool. "Dad," she said, "there's a large man or something in the pool." "Is it Mr. McClure?" my wife replied. "He looked kind of sweaty this afternoon." "Nope," Beth said. "It's even bigger than him." Ray Jr. said, "Hey, Dad, I think it's a Bigfoot." "A Bigfoot?" I replied. What's a Bigfoot doing in the pool? Looks like the backstroke, Beth said, and she would know. She was on the high school varsity swim team. I'm sure that's Mr. McClure, Laura said. But Ray, maybe you should get the camera just in case. We all were up now and peering through the room's curtains out to the pool. At the deep end, the 8-foot deep end, stood a massive, shaggy beast, at least 4 feet above the water's surface. It certainly was not Mr. McClure. Hey, Dad, my son said. The sign said the pool closes at 10. Maybe we better tell him. No, my wife replied, maybe we better not. Did you find the camera? I had been fumbling through our things, but it dawned on me that I had left the camera in the car because we had taken a few photos of the big sandwiches at Stonewall Jackson's. We had never seen so much meat, sauce, and lard cradled between 2 buns. Should I go out and get it? I asked. It may not be safe, hon, my sweet wife replied. But you know, a photo of that thing could be worth millions. So there it was. My sweet life companion of almost 20 years was subtly, yet cleverly daring me to go out, to risk my neck to get a dim, blurry photo of Bigfoot as it climbed out of the pool, then leaped and cannonballed back into the water. A massive water fountain shot up from the pool. I decided to risk it. I tiptoed out and tried to make myself look small as I crept past the pool area. My son had been right. There was a sign reading pool closes at 10, no lifeguard on duty. Y'all swim careful like. I had almost made it to the car when I realized in the excitement I had forgotten to bring the car keys. I waved and got my wife's attention. She and the kids were standing outside the room, hands clapped over their mouths, trying not to laugh. Hey, babe, I yelled. Babe was my secret sweet name for my wife. Throw me the car keys. She ran back into the room, then emerged and with a mighty toss flung those big Chevy Impala keys to me. From out of nowhere, a huge furred arm intercepted them. It was the Bigfoot. He held the keys out and motioned to the car. Then he said something that sounded like, "Shine, shine." His pronunciation was not the most crisp. It was a little blurred, but heck, we were in the South where no one speaks with precision. My sweet wife, the English teacher, would have noted him down for his poor dictation. But now you have to understand, I'm not making this up. That Bigfoot creature was asking me to go on a beer run for him. It was a struggle to get him into the car. Thank goodness we had the sunroof. Ray Jr. asked to go with, and what father would refuse such a request from his son? Hey, Dad, he yelled, can I ride shotgun? The Bigfoot sort of sighed and looked dejected, but he dutifully got out, let Ray Jr. in the front, then opened the back passenger door and stuffed himself inside. I could hear the suspension springs creak and moan painfully. We drove into Cannonburg and stopped at McClure's package store, which was owned and operated by Mr. McClure's brother, Cowpie McClure. Of course, I wouldn't take my 11-year-old son into the liquor store with me. Heck, it wouldn't be safe. So I left him in the car with the Bigfoot. Hey, Dad, he yelled when I came back out. Can we take Barn home with us? Barn, I said. Yeah, Dad, short for Barney. Can we take him home with us, please, please? And then I said what every married man with children has said probably 1,000,000 times in his life. Ask your mother. When we got back to the motor court, Laura and Beth were sitting by the pool. In her fake Southern accent, my sweet wife said, We've been sitting out here on the veranda, sipping on mint julep. Where is that breeze? Mom, Ray Jr. called. Can Barney come home with us? Dad said it's okay. Laura looked at me, but before I could say I said no such thing, she had figured it out, because every kid everywhere has played that trick on every parent everywhere. But she handled it very coolly. Well, son, she said, that would be nice, but Mr. Barney has family and friends here that he can't leave. It wouldn't be right, would it? I guess not, my son said. He battled back a sniffle. "We are just lucky to have met Mr. Barney," my sweet wife said. About then, the Bigfoot, Mr. Barney as it turns out, had just about drained his mason jar of moonshine. He kind of held it out, offering it to me, but I just put up my hand and gently shook my head. "Bye," he said, and then disappeared in the woods behind the motor lodge. "Wow," said Beth. "Did that really happen?" And that's the way we all felt. We knew it had affected us all, deeply. We all felt something majestic and meaningful about the whole trip and this night in particular. But life goes on, and we still had to get through Kentucky and Indiana. Where this encounter happened is in Lake County, Florida. Today, this area of Central Florida is part of a sprawling series of interlocked communities known as the Villages, if any of the residents are aware of the Florida skunk ape and the history of its prowling the area. Early on a spring morning, in the first week of March 1962, my buddy, TR, and I were out bow hunting for turkey. We were staying with a friend just off of US Highway 27. We got up at 4:30 a.m. and headed out in TR's pickup truck for a place we had hunted before, just off of SR 44 East, about 3.5 miles west of the cabin. We pulled off of the road about 100 yards. We got our gear and slipped through the sedge grass, turkey oaks, and other assorted Florida scrub brush. The sun was not up yet. A light mist was all over the ground, but there was enough light for us. Within minutes there was more light, and the mist started moving off with a light breeze from the west. I had an arrow knocked on the bowstring of my Kodiak bow, but stopped to get my chalk box call ready. We were kneeling down, gazing at a winding, mostly dry watercourse that ran from a small lake east toward the town of Okahumpka. We were looking almost due north when I squawked the chalk box. Immediately, diagonally to our right, a figure stood up from the water course bed. We could see this thing from mid-thigh to the top of the head. It was man-shaped, but we could see that it was much taller than any man we knew. It swiveled its head back and forth several times, seeming to be trying to locate the cause of the sound, but did not seem to lock in on us. It stepped up on the bank of the watercourse. The lip of the watercourse was approximately 4 to 5 feet above the bed of the watercourse. No man we knew could step 3 foot plus without scrambling. This thing did it effortlessly. I whispered to TR that our arrows would probably piss it off and we should head out in another direction. About that time, we saw this thing head diagonally off to our right, and it seemed to me that it would be quartering towards us. We hauled butt back to the truck and headed away from there, going west on SR 44 East for about 5 miles before we stopped and decided to hunt again. Later that morning, about 10:30 a.m., we headed back to the cabin. The sun was up, and we decided to stop at the first place to check out what we had seen. We walked up to the spot at the watercourse and saw several footprints that were slightly longer than my 18-inch machete blade. We went back to the truck and went back to the cabin to clean our turkeys. We told our friend, actually a cousin of TR's mom, an older man in his early 60s, about what we had seen. He told us we had seen a booger, and that they were prevalent around that area on and off for many, many years. He told us that the Seminole Indians had told stories about them when they had been in that part of Florida, as had the Spanish. I know now that today we call them Florida skunk apes. We never felt threatened, but to a pair of 16-year-old high school kids, it was a scary, as well as an unforgettable experience. For years, I never told anyone about this incident, but in the last few years now that I am almost 75, I do not care what people say, so I am telling it. Since then, I have been lucky enough in my work to travel all over the globe and have seen evidence of Sasquatch in the Pacific Northwest, the Bigfoot in the American Southwest, the Yeti in Asia and Siberia, especially on the Kamchatka Peninsula, and the Yowie in Australia, just to enumerate a few. I have tolerated the scoffers, avoided the sensationalists, and conferred with the serious and the scientists, all in my quest to learn more.